Oh, it's just like Hopalong Cassidy back there saying, roll them out. I always wait for the little doggies to come up behind me, which is a dangerous thing if you're not prepared for a bunch of little doggies to come up behind you. Of course, better that than a bunch of little Presbyterians. Well, if you recall, when we were speaking of the matter, before we get really wound up, of how it is that the less certain is the outcome of your activity, the more you have to dress up. And I was pointing out that even while these activities that would seem to be closer to actual hands-on acts require little in the way of haute couture, that a plumber does not have to dress up, whereas you would assume automatically that a psychiatrist is going to. And we even hit what would seem to be the obvious, that an ordinary person could hear this and not even see any significance, but if they were going to respond to it at all, say, well, the point is, an automobile mechanic, a plumber, has got to dress according to the amount of slop, grease, and etc. to which he may reasonably expect to be exposed. Yeah. What we started to hit just before we cut off last time was I wanted you to consider when life needs to move energy in a certain way through man. And this is just another prime example. For its own purposes, it will do so, and then it leaves it up to man, as it were, to make up the facts, to make up the explanations. It would seem to explain, and in the broader sense of the word, that would seem to justify the many and sundry curious and strange acts that man is given to perform. Trust me, that's not as strange as some of you may have thought. The example that I'd already set up was that there is no denying, even you and I are not that insane, there's no denying that if we point out that, hey, certain professions, certain people in life dress up, and certain ones do not, regardless of what extraordinarily strange theorem I started out with about the less certain outcome, the more you must dress up. An ordinary person could say, all right, there is reason for that, if they were going to condescend enough to talk to dunderheads like us. And so, well, there's a reason that a psychiatrist can dress up. He's not performing surgery. He's not even a podiatrist. He's not going to get blood on him. The man can dress up. He's a professional. An attorney can dress up. He's not going to be exposed to blood unless some of his clients come to their senses. But whereas an automobile mechanic is ridiculous. The man would have to be insane to dress up and then get under the hood of a car or to pull a transmission while wearing a nice suit. But notice, it's not that that's wrong. And it's so obvious. I mean, nobody can say otherwise. You and I cannot stand here and say, well, that's no reason. Hell yeah, it's a reason. Because I just admitted, a mechanic would be nuts, to be technical, to dress up and then crawl under and pull out a transmission and ruin his brand new suit. That's not even the point. That's not even close. That's just for ordinary people. Back to after the opening, remember, that the less certain outcome, the more that you must dress up, which we're also tying when we stopped last time, the closer you are to the world of acts, relatively speaking. That is, an act of pulling a transmission as opposed to the world of facts. The psychiatrist is not putting his hands on anybody. He is dealing in the world of ideas, the secondary world, a world of facts. And he even makes more money. But it is a separate world for the sake of our intellectual mapping. Now don't lose it for a second, because this is much wider than even the specific area we're apparently talking about. Is life, in a sense, we have to put in quotation marks, leaves it to man. That's part of man's job, is to make up facts. Can you, subtle, doesn't begin to cover it, but subtle, tricky, that if now someone as dumb as you or I would get out in public and say, Have you noticed that people involved, and we gave them a quick description of the difference between the world of acts and the world of facts, at least on the basis of avocations or vocations, and pointed out that there is a difference in the manner in which they must dress up. My words, must dress up. There you are, must dress up. And so the point is, a man working in the what you call the world of acts is actually going to be doing something on a hands-on manner. It may not be quite as greasy and gritty as pulling a transmission, but if he's doing something with his hands, he is more inclined not to run the risk of damaging good clothes. All right? Remember, we cannot say that's insane. If you and I had a job suddenly, if we could aspire to such as that, to work in a transmission shop, you and I would certainly ask, where do you get those real nice overalls so I don't have to run my good clothes? You and I would do it. That's not even the point. Do you understand that no matter what men do, they got an explanation for it? And don't tell me, well, it's obvious. Well, sure it's obvious. And don't tell me, well, it makes sense. Sure it makes sense. But you're going to miss it. It's still up to man to give an excuse. And I don't mean an excuse in any pejorative sense. To explain, to invent facts that if it never happened, which I'm jumping in the midst of reality, which cannot be, but I can do it verbally. If we suddenly jumped in the middle of reality, and it's almost as though things are as they are, and yet heretofore they were not. You got me? Sure. And you jump out of a tree down next to this guy's little garage, and he's dressed up in overalls, and he's about to pull a transmission, and you say, look at this photograph. This is my brother-in-law who's a psychiatrist. Look how nice he looks. And the guy looks, and you hold up a mirror to the mechanic and say, now look at you. You say, why are you dressed like that in this day and age? And he says, well, hell, I'd like to dress like that, but I'm about to pull a transmission. If I had a suit like that, it'd ruin it. Was it too subtle? One more time, I point out, it's obviously true three-dimensionally. It's sane, it's rational. You and I would do the same thing. So what? That doesn't explain anything. He had to, that is humanity. He had to, as part of his job, not just to pull transmissions. Life needs that done. And so somebody got to do it. But life not only needs the act of transmissions being pulled, it needs people dressed up accordingly, and it needs people ready to explain, and that's just one thing, but need to explain why they're dressed as they are. And don't tell me, well, the reason makes sense. Sure, it makes sense. But so what? What I said makes sense. Yeah, but it makes so much sense, or it makes such obscure sense, I don't see the significance of it. Aha. See, he gave us the reason he's dressed like that so that he wouldn't ruin good clothes. And I said, yeah, that's all right. But there's a bigger reason. The bigger reason is the less certain outcome, the more you must dress up. Conversely, the more certain, the more you must guarantee your work, such as a transmission. Forget just legally. The more that you're going to expect. If you pay a man X amount to pull your transmission, to exchange it, that he's going to exchange it, and when the new one or the rebuilt one he puts in will work. You and he both, assuming that he's just a reasonable, middle-of-the-road transmission man, you both expect that. It's guaranteed. Whereas you do not get such a guarantee from a man giving you analysis. And everybody understands that. And so then the person could say, an ordinary person could say, well, just because you admit that his explanation for dressing down so he wouldn't get dirty, you admit it was good and reasonable and sane, but then the one you give that has something to do with the fact that those areas wherein people are more dealing with acts, that their result, the work is guaranteed in the widest sense, and that they do not dress up as much as those whose outcome of the activity is not guaranteed. Then an ordinary person might say, which I tried to already pull on you 90 seconds ago, they might say, wait a minute, that makes so much sense I'm astounded. Or they might say, the sentence makes sense, but Jesus, that makes my head swim. What's the point? Try it a little bit more from a even higher, damn near 5D view. When in fact, it's closer to almost the non-existent view. Let's look at it this way: the more disturbing the act, to pull in a few of the last several nights, you recall things about those creatures who are privy to the facts, only those who are privy to the facts, are disturbed by the facts. You remember that? And only those that are privy to the facts feel corrupted by the facts. Only those who are privy to the facts want to be free from the facts. You remember all that. So here is a slight roundup of some of the little doggies. Let's look at it this way, that the more disturbing the act, and nowadays the fact, the more disturbing they are, the more outrageous, the more corrupting, the more disturbing from man's view, the greater is the necessity for men to come along behind them and make up facts. Nowadays, there are no acts. If any of you need a desperate hobby, find any exception to this. There are no acts for which there are no accompanying facts. I mean, I hate to send you off on start to say a fool's errand, but a good hobby is never a fool's errand. Because a man with a tin ear could hear you at home practicing your tuba and say, boy, what a waste of time. But hell, to great tuba lovers like you and I, he could say, what a fool's effort. What if the man becomes the world's greatest tuba player? Are we dealing now with a whole new level of definition of the word oxymoron? Or useless? So I shouldn't say it's a fool's errand. Go ahead, find me an act that has no succeeding, parallel, accompanying fact. Of course you can't, because if you find one and you come tell me about it, ha-ha! See? It's not that I won, it's that we're all done for. That is, that life will win. That's what happens, that it's working for an unknown employee is also not at all unlike doing the tango. So, the more, I'm just trying to wrap up the kinds of things we're discussing, the kind of amounts we were doing, the more the acts, and nowadays the facts, because remember, facts now give rise to other facts. From a secondary view, the more outrageous, whether it be acts or facts or the combined world, you should be able to do that, but now after 3 or 4 nights of us talking about it, the more outrageous it would seem, the more corruptive, the more confining, all the things we mentioned about creatures privy to the facts, the more it's that way, the more life needs men to even succeed, to follow up those initial facts of saying, ooh, there's a car wreck. Ugh. That won't do. The car wreck itself, or ooh, there's a person just fell off the cliff there and fell down the valley, and look, their skull is split up. Ugh. Looks like a hamburger that somebody threw out a car window. Ugh. All right, the act itself is no longer sufficient. That is, that you walked over. My moot is that this was before there was a fact. You walk over and saw this horrible thing. So that's no longer sufficient. Now you must go over and look down there and go, God almighty, that could have been me or something. See, that's a fact. Or to go, hey, Hubert, come here and look at this. Or, hey, is that the guy that owes me money down there? Nowadays, just going over and observing this, let's say, horrible, corruptive, disturbing act is not sufficient. It's sufficient. It's a little bit of energy for you to go over and look down at this guy and he's laying down, his skull split up, and you look down there and go, yeah, that's some transfer of energy. But you can't argue with me. You can't argue with life. Or those of you who are good, you cannot argue with the facts. But that's no longer sufficient. Can you prove that? Sure. Okay, I just wanted to know. Well, can you go past a car wreck now without commenting? Don't ask me for proof. You're living proof. If you're at all, what do they call it in the city? Conscious. Can you see that you just walk past and some poor bastard slips on the curb and falls down? At least you think we'll have to go back to hoary caveman days, and the person falls and hits and splits their head right there on 42nd Street. They weren't even tap dancing. And there it is. Can you just look at it and that's it? Can any human look at it without going, ew? Or to look at somebody and say, did you see that? Or where's an attorney? Or if nobody's there and nobody for you to say anything to, can you look at it and internally, you and your partner, Not do one or two steps and go, God damn, that could have been me. Or how about the guy was drunk? There's your proof. The acts are no longer sufficient in the general scheme of modern, which is almost everybody, civilized man. So after the act has to be a fact. Now there's some comment on it. It's got to be dragged into the secondary world. But nowadays, even that's not enough. It's not just enough for you to see the person fall and go, ooh, that's horrible. You know that. You're the living proof. But you'll turn to somebody there. You're in the midst of a crowd of strangers, but you'll turn and go, not only to yourself, ooh, but you turn to somebody else like, ooh. And they go, ugh. But they go, hey, don't add it on my business. The act is a progenitor of facts, facts, facts. Many, many, many generations. The thing is, looks at it from a certain view. It's just our mapping of it. There is certainly no objective judgment being made for me to call certain acts or facts corruptive or disturbing. I'm saying from the person's view, the person that's wired up at any particular time, and they see the facts, which in general is still under the umbrella that we have used for several nights, that those creatures privy to facts, only those. But once they are privy to them, they become disturbed by the facts. Creature is privy to the facts, want to be free from the facts. Creature is privy to, driven by facts, then begin to find the facts corruptive. All of that. But the more, assuming that you have some symbolic idea of what we've been talking about, then in general, to pull those together, the more the acts and the facts, which always follow, the more that whole scenario, at least in the first generation, the act and then the fact, to give you somewhere to start. Look at that as the original sperm, the original seed of it. The more it seems to anybody, to a person, to a whole community, the more it seems disturbing, / confining, / corruptive, the more life needs, as soon as possible, but the more life needs men to make up continuing, succeeding facts, comments, explanations, criticisms. It's all the same thing. It's facts. With all, get back in the world of media. Everybody knows during a break, they come on your local station and say, plane just crashes outside of town, 100 suspected dead, film at 11. What I'm talking about is that same thing. That is the background. It's not them doing teasers for their own shows. All of that is simply a reflection of the fact, what they're saying is, facts to follow. See, right between the shows, they show, they've already sent a guy out there, and so they show the twisted tail of the plane down the ditch, and smoke coming up, and fire engines going. And they just flash it for a second. Plane crashes outside of town, 100 suspected dead. And then they go back to showing their logo, whatever channel it is, and they're fixing to go into the next show, and the voiceover says, it says film at 11, but what it's saying is facts to follow. That's where they got the whole idea of film at 11. That's where they got the whole idea of all advertising for news. And I don't mean just today. I mean, one of the Caesars sending out a guy, and he runs, and he gets over to Sparta after running all day, and he runs in. The king says, yes. The guy says, film at 11. Facts to follow. Caesar has a message. Which is also, I don't have time to go into it, is the whole idea that somebody here, in fact a Canadian, a good hoser, I think, tried to take credit about the medium is the message. No, the runner was the message, which is where they stole that. The guy ran 26 miles. What was his name? Mr. Olympic. The man showing up comes panting, running into the town there. And immediately if we had McLuhan to say, aha, the medium's the message. No, the runner was the message. No, the act was the message. Getting closer and closer. The man moving, the act of him moving tells me one thing. Get your breath, sir. What is it? It must be horrible if you ran all the way from Athens to here. He doesn't have to say what it is, because what he's going to say, no matter what he says, what he's going to say is, facts to follow. You mean I went through all that and that's all I got? What it means, the whole thing, the medium's the message, facts to film at 11, what it means is immediately after all viable, repeatable human experience. Now I say repeat on the basis that it's not a one-shot deal. It's going to happen some more. When that happens, life sends along a runner. It sends along a voiceover. It sends along a teaser to say film at 11. Because what it's saying is facts to follow this act. Or if you just heard the facts, this already succeeded the act. And to you, the act itself is the fact. Because you didn't see the act, you just heard about it. It happened yesterday. Well, I was out of town. I had the hangers. I had the hangovers, and I don't know, I've been out of pocket. And so the first thing you know about the act is the fact. And so to you, that's the initial act. But even that announces facts to follow. Or in a sense, more facts to follow. But the first time you heard the fact, to you, that was the act. But whatever it is, if it's going to continue for some length of time in the life of the city, then it's always, stay tuned, film at 11. Facts to follow. All right, more facts to follow. Okay, more facts after that to follow. You see? They just don't have the time to do all that. Plus, you know it. You know that they're not going to have the news tonight at 11 and even film, and that be it. That you'll never see the news again. You know damn well that tomorrow night at 11, to say the very least, they'll be there again. The night after that. That's why they don't have to say facts to follow. More facts to follow. It's not necessary. We could close out this paragraph before we really take off. I was going to suggest maybe a seditious hymn. Let's try a G or A flat. I think it would go like this. A seditious hymn. It would be only a revolutionist can be civilized and not suffer therefrom. Well, some people just have no ear for music. It's not my fault. For some people have no eye for sedition. All right. Would you now, Carol, we got some time, to finally strip and let's get down to the nude, or for some of you, naked, neural skydiving for the weekend. I guess that's nude probably in New York and Philadelphia. New Jersey and Alabama, as you know, over there, if you say nude, people go, what? And you have to say naked. Or sometimes naked. Parts of Alabama and Tennessee, being nude is not even a recognized activity. Anybody got nude, nobody cares. If you could do it, you got to get naked. And then they understand, all right. Not unlike doing the tango here, in the nakedness. How about this? Facts would see acts as absolutes and would aspire to the same condition. That is getting close to the weekend wrap-up that I was trying to tease you with last time about film at Saturday. Facts would see acts as being absolutes. And then facts, as I'm trying to get you to see, are driven to aspire to reach that condition. They cannot see below. That is, stay tuned. You could look at this as being part of the driving machinery of facts trying to reach, continually trying to reach the condition, as they would see it, of absoluteness that is native to acts. You could look at it as being part of the driving machinery of civilization. But you can definitely see it, I will hope in the next 15 minutes or so, in what drives men's singular, human, mortal, intellectual, personality-based, individuality. That whole niche on the planet Earth that men seem to occupy, you can see it as, in some way, coming out of this dynamic of facts trying to reach the state of absoluteness that they see acts occupying. Consider. Well, several ways. How about from mythology to science? From one sense, you could see facts, viewing acts as being living revisions of the old mythical gods. Good old, pick out any you want to, good old Greek, the best known, the whole family of these absolute. Their power was unconditional, absolute. They were oftentimes terrifying in the certainty of their purpose. If they'd been human, they'd been known as being, bullheaded, tunnel-visioned. But who was going to tell a god that? All the stories that a god suddenly gets the hornies for some woman. And they bring out whole armies. They bring out priests. His brother-in-law says, "Oh, you can't do that." Who's going to tell a god he can't do it? In a sense, facts see acts as occupying a not dissimilar niche. If you would like it a little more modern, look at what science is. You can see quite clearly, if you begin to catch a glimpse of what we're sketching, you can see science as being the absolute, or at the absolute forefront of man's attempt to make facts absolute. What else is science? That is exactly bloody what it is. No matter, and they couldn't deny that. That is exactly what it is. The scientific, everything from their academic description, their clinical description of the scientific process, the whole march of science, technology, from a broader sense, again, the whole march of civilization, but take science specifically. To give you a further end from ideas that I was bringing up of the symbolic or metaphorical aspect of mythology, down to the hard-nosed, clear-headed, that's why you look clear-headed, of science. What are they attempting to do? Science attempts to make facts absolute, to come up with theorems, theories, working hypotheses. That's Arkansas plural for hypothesis. Is to go from that and to bring it down to the facts becoming no longer theories. Remember how we're using facts in the whole sense of anything that's not an act. It's to make a theory become no longer a theory, but a law. It is to make facts absolute. The further they push it, philosophically, theoretically, and practically, but even philosophically when they try to talk about the philosophy of science, as they continue to want to call it, to get down to the basic, to bring it all down to a unified, to bring down all of the major forces as they see them now, to bring it down to one unifying force, then one unifying theory, and then finally one unifying law. And they keep foaming at the mouth. I'm not attacking them. But they just keep saying, we just know we'll get there. We're getting closer and closer. It's been a very quick march since the 20s, since Einstein and Planck and Heidelberg. We're going. We're going. What is it, though, that they're going? I don't mean they're no attack on science. What is it? It is facts aspiring to the absolute state of acts. And it's science. Almost everybody would agree except real rolled in fresh dough fundamental Christians and Muslims and other people, that science, is, at least in this life, has got to be our salvation. It's where people look to science, technology. And what is it? It's not acts. Technology turns it into a form of an act, but it is facts aspiring to be as absolute as acts are. That's what science is. Those of you who care to in your own spare time, you can look at the secondary world trying to do something. It's trying to become something else. But if you looked at it with a secondary mind, you would think, wait a minute, if I hear what you're hinting, then you'd want to say it's a secondary mind trying to go backwards. See, that's when you think on a merry-go-round. Because the only way you can go is, yeah, we can go that way. Yeah, but don't you see? No, I'm sorry, I got to go. I'm in a hurry. Okay, well, I'll wait here on you. And no, I won't be back. I'm gone. I'm off to see the lizard. I'm off on an intellectual frolic. I'm off on an adventure. A cerebral sojourn from which I plan not to return. Right, I'll wait here on you. Before you lose your place, let me repeat again before I go any further. Facts could see acts as being absolutes. And they aspire to that same condition. That is a law. That's no theorem. That's no hypotheses. That is a law. I'll grant you it has no visible means of support in the 3D world. To 3D minds. But it is a law. It cannot be. See below. So all the way from science to the kinds of mythological dreams that men have had, if you can see it, is the world now of facts, living solely on this planet in man's brain, at the hands of the brain stem, where he thinks and talks. And it's that. It's nothing goofy. It's nothing spiritual. It's nothing mystical. It's right here. It's electrical. That is the world of facts, and what they are trying to do in one quite real, operationally useful sense is trying to become as absolute as here, without them ever analyzing it, there sees screwing, eating, sleeping, living, dying, being hot, being cold, as being absolutes. And this aspires to that same thing and cannot be, see below. So beyond some wide example from science to mythology, somewhere close to the middle I wanted to also point out how man, in the world of facts, that is his speech, let's start there, is driven more and more to try and put emotions in the back seat. And to put that part of his systemic operations, the intellect, the world of facts, in the driver's seat. It's explained from all sorts of ways. People have been driven to talk about it for thousands of years, but you hear modern variations of it now, and it strikes many, many, many people as being correct, that we need to be less emotional. There's a place probably for human emotion, but we simply have got to be less emotional, and we would not be getting into all of these unprofitable wars. We would not be killing one another over all ridiculous things. Not over killing each other over food, my goodness. We have reasonably dressed up people killing each other, can you believe it, over some political theory. They're taking the part of the nervous system, the electrical energy of the nervous system down, as physiology wants to call it, the limbic system, and it's trying to say that was all right at one time. But it has got to be in some way suppressed. It has got to be playing a lesser role We have got to place our faith where? Here, because this, they don't go this far. Now I'm doing it. Because this thing wants to aspire to absolutes. This is also, I don't guess it comes as a shock, this is also part of the unrecognized basis of the continuing apparent conflict, the deep, passionate rift between religion and science. Even before they had it, well, they always had a word for science, but you must know what I mean, between religion and the world of academia. But it's generally wrapped up as being this, and today they're still doing it. That there seems to be some just absolutely irreconcilable, some kind of inherent great division between religion and science. Of course, the religious people can explain it away. Well, most scientists are heathens. And of course, most scientists say, Jesus, most of those, especially the ones that attack us, those people, most of them got an 8th grade education, and a whole lot of them are Baptist or somebody. You know what they're really talking about, though? Is this kind of passionate and apparently almost, can you say unbridgeable? All right. Gap between religion and science. Look at it this way. What they are actually talking about vis-a-vis our Saturday mapping is that they are actually involved with talking about a struggle between facts that could become absolute and those which cannot. Oh, come on. That's what they're doing. The struggle, in the broadest sense, which is still going on, it was going on during Plato's time, for instance. The struggle, apparently, the irreconcilable conflict between science and religion is actually a struggle between two aspects of life in man, one of which is pursuing facts on the basis that they could become absolute, i.e. science, and the other area wherein they cannot, i.e. religion. Now don't take it as being a pro or con that there was an attack on either one. Even religion will tell you. The thinkers in any religion will tell you, no, religion cannot compete, nor should it, but religion cannot compete on some kind of intellectual level playing field with science. That is not the purpose of religion. And they normally fall back on things like on faith. They fall back, without them knowing it, on the limitations of a polarized flow of electrical energy in one's brain that they like to call spirit and soul and all that it cannot be otherwise. And so they have to say, well, there are things that cannot be proven. And they're just saying simply what we've done in other ways, that there are limits in a 3D existence of what polarized energy can do. And so they both know it. Of course, science, an ordinary person, with their wired up to take a position, scientists will say, you know, they always say, well, you got to deal on faith. It's simply because their facts, and here's what they're saying, their facts can never be absolute. And they're right. But we're still not saying right or wrong. And the other group said, well, wait a minute. And people with that kind of mechanically wired up electrical position, let's say of being ordinarily religious, they look at what I'm saying, if they were hearing it, they look at the scientist, and they would take it as being a pro and con. They see it as an attack. They say, they're attacking us. The only reason that their kind of so-called facts can become absolute is because they are mundane. They're just everyday. Ours, the very thing they attack us doing, that they say, well, and then they refer back to me and say, that guy, you know, he was talking about that there's two groups, those whose pursuit is facts that could become absolute, and those that never can. All right. The scientists took that, and they turned it on us just then, and they said, see, ours might become absolute. He even said that. And he was inferring that yours can't. And the religious people say, yeah, but you took that as being an attack. Contraire, Pierre. Because it just proves, from our view, the kinds of things that are interested in our kinds of facts cannot become absolute because they are transcendental. because they are not subject to, they are not limited to this kind of phony baloney, true or false, or prove some theorem. The gods, cosmic forces, are not so simplistic as to be able to be contained in an equation. Ha! So as always, see, everybody wins. Life only plays win-win games, but you know, according to the game theory and economics, here on planet Earth, it appears to be otherwise. But life never loses. But it is this apparent continuing conflict between religion and science in the broadest sense, because what it's really between, in a more physiologically based description, is between the cerebral cortex and between, at the best, the so-called limbic part of the human nervous system, is between the older, closer to primary level emotional reactions of the human nervous system, as opposed to that which is laughingly referred to as the intellect and dealing in reason, and in some way can overcome, or is obviously in conflict with human emotion very often. And for those that are more driven by this, also see that this is the superior mode of operation. Although we need emotion, we cannot continue to be driven by those ghastly echoes, some of the less civilized reruns of that old part of our nervous system. We must be driven by this. And they're saying, without them knowing it, that it is still a division between acts and facts. And without them knowing it, they are also saying what I was pointing out one more time. What they're also pointing out is there are two possible ways that you could look at this if you're a revolutionist, if you got a reason to want to see above it all and behind it. And that is, religion and science represents, first, let's say science, is an area of facts, as secondary affairs, but facts that could become absolute. That could. Science says it can. Some of the things that were theories 20 years ago are now in textbooks as laws. We're not arguing that. That's the way it operates. The world of science is dealing with facts that could. It's possible that this theory, that is, this fact over here, can become, it's possible, it can become, we've proven it in the past, it can become absolute. It's possible. Whereas religion, the second one, there is no possibility. Even they admit it. Of course, then the religious people again will jump and say, yeah, but that even proves we're better. That's not the point. That is what it is. But do you see, in both cases, the nature of facts, part of the driving machinery of life is that facts see acts, relatively speaking, but they would see acts as being absolute compared to them. And in a sense, all facts want to grow up when they get to be big and strong and become acts. And they can't. See below. Holy Mother of God, 3 minutes. Is it possible to fit 27 hours worth of comments in 3 minutes? Is it not possible to put, judging from all human conditions, to put 220 pounds of duck flop in a 115-pound jacket? Sure. But see, that's the world of acts. Aha, world of facts, it's a bit trickier. Well, I don't guess I'll press on, because we'll just get started on something else. It was one or two things I was going to try to wrap up. But how about this? Stay tuned. Turn back in tomorrow. Film at 11. Because this was actually just a lead up to something else. Not to be confused with the Lido, for those of you who have been in Paris. And for those of you who know what the Lido is and have been in Paris, then I ask you, what in the hell are you doing back here? Are we to take this to be some visible display of your level of sophistication? Are we off the air yet? 25 seconds. Well, wait, on the news, they run the credits and stuff, and those guys sit there and they take pens like they're writing something important. There's people sitting there been reading the news for 30 minutes. But somebody hand it to them that they wrote, and they get through and they make notes like, well, next time I'll do so-and-so. We got 1 whole minute left. Oh, hell with it.